It used to be that only a few million people in the democratic West had freedoms to create, to think freely, to innovate. Now more people are doing the same thing. That's what globalization is really about. Technological and political changes that makes it possible for the Colombian farmer and the Vietnamese factory worker to put their work at the disposal of the world markets, and therefore also attract the capital and the technology that makes them more productive so that they can climb out of poverty. The old Thai joke was that the Chinese and the Indians were successful everywhere in the world, except in India and in China, because they were stopped by License Raj and the Communist Party. But what has happened since then is a tremendous change, an incredible growth of wealth. And the popular story is that this is somewhat based on foreseeing politicians and rulers and in China, dictators who told them to go forth and do productive things. That's not the case. It happened in the cracks. It happened from the bottom up, because individuals started to use the small, tiny amounts of freedoms that they had. In China, agriculture used to be collectivized. You were forced to use different crops and different methods that the Communist Party told you to, and you couldn't keep the rewards if you were successful and worked hard. Some Chinese farmers and families thought that this is just a way for us to slowly kill our children because we can't grow enough. So secretly, in the late 1970s, they began to privatize the land that they worked on. So families could grow whatever they wanted and they could keep the rewards. And as a result, productivity in agriculture boomed incredibly. As one peasant said, it's like a chicken pest. If one village has this private ownership, everybody has it suddenly. And only then and only then, the Communist Party said, okay, we dislike this secret privatization, but on the other hand, we're not that much in favor of starvation either. So then they began to liberalize, only after the fact. The same thing in India. What got the Indian economy onto an export-based, and parts of it a modern sort of technologically-based, service-oriented export market? It happened in telecom services, it happened in the internet services from the beginning. And what made that different from all the other sectors of the economy that couldn't function? Well, the difference was that the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi said, we have to control everything that's important in the economy. The factories, the manufacturing, the agriculture. So lots of regulations and bureaucracy and everything. But you know, telephones, that's nothing for poor Indian people. We don't need telephones, so let that be deregulated and then we won't have to care about it. And then some entrepreneurs and workers started to innovate there and began to slowly change things in a dramatic setting. That's what's happening in more and more places around the world. People use the freedoms they've got, they prove that it works, and then, and only then, politicians begin to come around and begin to liberalize more, and then people use that freedom. As a result, the world has just had its best 20 years ever. This development, this change, is bigger than the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, that was some 200 million people in Western Europe and the United States who doubled their average income in some 60 years. Today, India and China alone did the same thing with 2 billion people in just 15 years. So it's 10 times more people in only a fifth of the time. 10 times 5 is 50. It's 50 times bigger than the Industrial Revolution, if you use a back-of-the-envelope calculation. If you look at all the statistics of development and on changes in human living standards, it's amazing. You should do this sometime, because it's like being beaten over the head with a rainbow. Extreme poverty around the world in the last 20 years has been reduced from 43% to 17%. 900 million people were lifted out of extreme poverty, which means that every minute that people complained about globalization, some 5,000 people rose out of poverty. That is the triumph of capitalism. And it's not the triumph of a system. It's the triumph of people, hard-working individuals and entrepreneurs and workers who do what they can to make their lives and their families' lives better. It's happening in more places than ever right now, and it's happening in the cracks. As the great philosopher Leonard Cohen put it, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And there are not cracks everywhere. It's not light everywhere. We can still see despair, poverty, and misery in the parts of the world where people do not have that freedom, in the sectors where we do not have that freedom. So there is an unequal distribution of capital in the world, but that's because of the unequal distribution of capitalism. Those who have capitalism and who have had capitalism for 50 or 200 years, they have grown rich, whereas those who haven't had capitalism, they are still poor.